J-Tech Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. It's America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. And now, here are your hosts, Tom Bastak and Mike Jacobs.
And welcome in. It's America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. It's the game show, guys. I'm Tom Bastak.
And I'm Mike Jacobs. Welcome, everyone. What are we, 17 now? I feel like I've lost count. We've got so many.
Oh, my gosh. You know what, Mike? Don't worry. We'll get to season 2 here shortly, and we'll just reset all the numbers. How's that?
Right. Yes. Season 2 coming up. Indeed. I forgot about that. We're going to take, I guess, an undisclosed amount of time off so we can start working on some of the side projects that we've been talking about and kind of put up or shut up in that instance and get those out there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be great. Plus, we've got a really great show that we're going to talk about after the news for the end of the season as well.
Indeed.
All right. A little bit of housekeeping. Just wanted to apologize real quick up front. Sorry about the mix-up with the segments from last week. For those of you who listened early last week, it went segment 3, then 2, then 1. These things happen, guys. We're just amateurs doing this.
Everybody's human, right? Well, hey, good on you, Tom, for getting in there and fixing it so quickly. I don't think maybe too many people were affected by it, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
There was at least 30 listens at that point.
Well, maybe it was the same person 30 times, and they were just trying to figure out what was going on.
Perfect. Well, thanks to friends and family and Twitterers that sent us a hello that said, hey, guys, check your audio.
Whoops.
All right. Also, the Hire Us page is up at the website, tellthemwhattheywon.com. It's tellthemwhattheywon.com/hire-us.
Yeah. Yep. We are open for business, as it were. We specialize in virtual events. So if you want something for a virtual party or office get-together on the internet, we can certainly accommodate your needs. Check out tellthemwhattheywon.com/hire-us. And see what offerings we have. It's a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I can't wait. Speaking of not being able to wait, we should probably get into the news.
Yes, let's do it.
Light up your cigarette, crack open a beer, and put the kiddos to bed. From chaos around the world to carnage in your very own front yard, it's time for the news.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mike. This is the news brought to you by BuzzerBlog.com. I'm Christian Carrion. A new British import is on its way to the States beginning September 4th, and Nickelodeon is playing host. The Crystal Maze, an adaptation of the classic British series, will be debuting next week, hosted by Adam Conover, famous for his role as host of the YouTube and True TV series Adam Ruins Everything. The Crystal Maze sees a team working together to overcome obstacles and earn time crystals in the Crystal Maze, a massive set with 4 distinct time zones. The show originally ran in the UK from 1990 to 1995, and in 2016, a one-off special reboot of the show was hosted by comedian Stephen Merchant. I've seen the show a couple times. You talk about a show with a larger-than-life set. You could live on the set of the Crystal Maze. It's like its own country. It's incredible.
My question is I mean, if it's that big, how long does it take people to get through the maze? I mean, do they edit it down so that it fits in an episode?
Well, the way that they set up the show, the host is almost like the resident expert of the maze, and it's not much of a maze. It's called the Crystal Maze, but it's like, if you've ever seen Funhouse, it's like Funhouse times 5. It's like if each time zone was its own Funhouse, and the team is guided through, almost Willy Wonka style, by the host of the show. So in that sense, Adam, I think, is going to be a really good choice of host. I'm excited to see how he does with the kids. I think he has a really playful personality. So I don't know. Hopefully that goes well.
Well, I don't know much about the original show, but everything you just said, like, hit me right in the, oh, I want to see this. Like, first of all, Nickelodeon game shows, as we've talked about on the podcast, that's my wheelhouse. Stephen Merchant is amazing. Adam Conover is fantastic. I don't know if you've listened to his podcast at all, but it is so good. He is awesome, and I am 100% on board with this concept.
Nice. What else you got for us, Christian?
Well, a classic word game is returning to screens in the UK. Lingo is being revived by the British network ITV. The show, which deals with using a mastermind-style process of deduction to guess mystery words, was rebooted in the Netherlands in 2016 to great success, and the format was last seen in the States on GSN in 2011, hosted by comedian Bill Engvall. Lingo is one of my favorites. It's one of those games that's not only a good game show, but it's a good game in and of itself. I have a Lingo app on my phone, and that's like one of my most frequently played games. It's just such a good time waster and such a good way to keep your brain going. I love Lingo.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just saying, I agree. I absolutely love that show. And it was funny. I was watching some episodes on YouTube the other day, and then I was going to go take a shower, and I didn't stop watching. I just, brought the laptop into the bathroom with me and started playing it while I was in the shower. And you can still play. Like, you don't have to watch that show to play along. It's great.
What's the name of the app that you have, Christian? Is it just Lingo?
I think it is just called Lingo. It's not official, but yeah, there are a few Lingo apps. I have an iPhone, so there are a few Lingo apps on the App Store, but yeah, mine is just called Lingo.
Cool. All right, anything else for us?
Well, we have a bit of a follow-up to something we discussed last week. If you remember our discussion of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, I mentioned that there was an episode that was unaired back in 1992 where a kid fell and broke her arm during the bonus round.
Right.
Since then, we've gotten comments from readers on BuzzerBlog, from listeners to the podcast, asking me to expand on that, offering corroboration to it, offering denial of it. I wasn't sure if it was real or if it was an urban legend, so I decided to do some research. And thank you to everyone at WGBH in Boston, Massachusetts, everyone at WQED in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thank you to Greg Lee, the host of the show. Thank you to Howard Blumenthal, the creator, Mark Summers, the apparent substitute host, for all the input and insight they've given me. My conclusion, and I'm leaning more and more towards this, is that it was a complete urban legend. There seems to be a fan fiction sort of site that mentions it over a decade ago, and I think that it sort of blew up from there. And I think that the way the internet does takes a rumor and expands it to factual proportions. I think it's a big lie, but we got a lot of interesting research done, and I'm really excited to share the results of all that in an upcoming full-length BuzzerBlog post.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with you that I think it might be kind of a bunch of hooey. And when we reported on it and we talked about the episode on the podcast, and we found the episode on IMDb and it had credits and all that, and Mark Summers was listed as the host, at the time that seemed definitive to me, but now that I'm reflecting on it, I have definitely seen entries on IMDb that were certainly not true. I remember seeing on IMDb that there was supposedly a remake of the infamously horrible movie Manos, The Hands of Fate, directed by the famously brilliant director Michel Gondry. That obviously never happened. In other words, my point is I don't think IMDb is a end-all be-all of truth. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you that this is not a real thing.
Well, I can't wait to read the full article and find out how all the research went. Thank you for going down that rabbit hole. Really great stuff.
Yeah, it was a wild ride. I cannot wait to share it with everyone.
All right, so we got this week in game show history. Christian, what do you have for us?
Well, we are going back to the early 90s. Then we have this week the premiere of a show that I grew up with for some reason, Masters of the Maze on the Family Channel, which for the 2 hours that they broadcast these sort of kid-centric shows was called Fam TV to try and seem more edgy and Gen X, Masters of the Maze was a kids show hosted by J.E. Roth, who we knew at this point from Funhouse. He would go on to host a show called Wild Animal Games, and of course go on to become one of the co-creators of the reality show The Biggest Loser. So this was one of his first hosting gigs. Oh boy, it's bad. It's bad. It's not good.
They sure do go all out on the set, though. I tell you what.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they do. Masters of the Maze had this beautiful sort of crystally, and not to, and I forgive the pun, but it was an actual crystal maze. And so you had a basic sort of front game where you had 3 teams with 2 kids answering questions, identifying pictures, and for the chance to go into the maze. Now, once you go into the maze, you're confronted by a bunch of sort of I don't know what you would call them, almost like Native American idols who would ask you true or false questions. And there was a big mirror man who you had to answer a question to get by him if he ran into you in the maze. And there was some sort of virtual reality suit that vibrated in different areas where you had to, if your arm vibrated on your right, you'd have to run to your right. It was just an enormous mess. It really, it worked as well as I described it. But it's a definite time capsule of early 90s television, and if you find it on YouTube, check it out, but just don't watch too much of it.
Well, I was gonna say watch it on mute because it's beautiful to look at, but it is not a great show.
We'll put the episode up on the website for this week, so just check it out on there.
Absolutely. Also, I should also mention that J.D. Roth was the host for the first season. He was replaced in season 2 by Mario Lopez of Saved by the Bell.
Oh.
Good old Mario.
I bet you he tells his girlfriends that J.D. Roth does. Like, do you know I was replaced by Slater?
Hey, here's a trivia question. You know what the AC in AC Slater stands for?
Adult Contemporary?
No, that's a good guess, though.
Air conditioning?
No.
Atlantic City.
Albert Clifford.
Oh, okay.
Hey, yeah, now we know why he went by AC. There we go. All right, this week on the podcast, our feature show is The Gong Show. Christian, any thoughts?
Is there any show in the history of TV that has ever done what The Gong Show has tried to do and been as fun? The Gong Show is just unbelievable fun no matter what era you're watching it in. I mean, it is peak Chuck Barris. It's just out of the box and frenetic and mystifying. I love The Gong Show. It's funny that the show originally was hosted by a man named John Barber, who was a sort of local journalist, went on to work on a show called Real People, and he, in the 5 episodes that he recorded that they never aired, was very serious about the talent portion of the show. He thought it was an actual talent search and they were going to find the next big star. So he was very critical of the celebrities who would gong these terrible acts, thinking that it was hurting their feelings and not realizing what the point of the show was. And I heard this from an interview that I did with a game show host for my podcast, but he got the call from Chuck Barris letting him know that he would not be hosting it, and Chuck Barris broke the news to him by saying, "Congratulations, you have the misfortune of working for a producer who's a better host than you." And that's how he got fired.
Good old Chuck Barris, always pulling something crazy.
Yeah, that's Chuck Barris to a T. I get it. Well,
yeah. Right. It all worked out for the best, though, because that is a classic game show.
Well, and it's funny because had they gone the talent angle, they basically would have had America's Got Talent or American Idol or something like that. And to me, the pleasure of Gong Show is seeing people not do well.
Right, and even when the show first started back in the mid '70s, that was the hook. It was subversive because TV and radio had been founded partly on that type of programming. You had like Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, and you had all these like radio talent competitions and singing competitions. So it was great. And it was probably one of the first times you saw on TV a talent show where it was all bad acts. I mean, just that simple subversive twist on that formula is a stroke of genius,
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Christian, how about a plug for BuzzerBlog?
Of course, BuzzerBlog.com, the #1 game show website in the world. Whether you're looking for news on current series, returning series, mysterious lost episodes where children break limbs, and Gene Wilder might have been there for some reason, except he probably wasn't because he was working in California on a sitcom at the time. BuzzerBlog.com is the place to go. BuzzerBlog with a G at the end of it. .com.
Good thing you added that G at the end because otherwise it would be BuzzerBlog.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Christian, thank you so much. We'll see you again next week. All right, buddy?
My pleasure, as always.
All right. Thank you, Christian, for the news. Mike, let's talk about the really big shoe.
The really big show. Well, we got 3 weeks, I guess. We're gonna call season 1 at 20 episodes. So we will be in true television fashion, ending our first season with a really big show.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Don't want to give too much away about it, except to say that there'll be more Christian than there's ever been before.
Ooh, that's big.
There'll be more game shows covered than we've ever covered before.
Ooh, that's big. Although it's a pretty low bar. We could go 2 and that would be more. Just saying.
Mike, you've just taken away. You inflated the balloon and then you went with just let all the air right out of
Hey,
it.
you know what? It's still going to be big.
All right, well, I'll tell you what. Tune in and check it out. It's episode 20. It's coming just 3 weeks away, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, we've got our featured game for this week, which is...
The Gong Show.
Well, we will check out the gameplay when we return of the Gong Show. Is there really a lot of gameplay, Mike?
This will likely be our fastest gameplay segment to date.
Excellent. Well, we're going to have a pretty long history one as well. Plus, Mike and I will talk about our opinions on it. And believe it or not, they vary differently. And I don't think it's the way you think.
You're probably right about that.
All right, check it out. We're taking a break. We'll be right back. You've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. Welcome back. If you know that sound, you know it's Gong Show time.
Gong Show time. And I'm going to start this one by saying I went the opposite of what I thought I would. Like I said earlier, this is the shortest gameplay we have yet. There is no gameplay here. But it's about the contestants. It's not about the celebrities like with Match Game and Hollywood Squares. So I'm on board with this game. But let's go to the gameplay anyways, such that it is. The elevator pitch, I suppose, for this show is that it is an amateur talent show. You pull in contestants from around the country that have all sorts of little bits, acts, songs, dances, comedy numbers, whatever it is they want to show off and get their so-called 15 minutes of fame. That's about it. The contestant comes out. They have at least 20 seconds. That was the initial rule. It was later extended to 30 seconds, and then even further after that to 45 seconds, meaning that they could perform for that long in order to impress the panel of celebrity judges who were watching and sitting, aptly named, in judgment. And if they felt that the act was not going well, they could hit the giant gong sitting behind them to end the performance. And so that's where the time limit comes in, that they had to wait at least that long before they could hit the gong. A lot of famous people played these judges over the years. I would say J.P. Morgan was maybe the most recurring and therefore well-known of them. We had Rip Taylor, Steve Martin, who also performed at one point on the show, Phyllis Diller, David Letterman, Soupy Sales, Alan Ludden, Rue McClanahan. Of course, just a very short list of celebrity judges that the show would see over its tenure, of course. But yeah, so if the act is gonged, of course, they end and they are no longer allowed to perform. They must leave the show. If the bit is not gonged, then the judges will give them a rating between 1 and 10. There are a couple times where they gave them zeros. I'll talk about that more in the history. And that would give them their ranking, I suppose, in the overall standings for the show that day. And then the highest ranked act for that day is the winner. They are given $516.32.
Well, that seems very arbitrary, Mike.
It seems arbitrary, but it in fact is not. It is the day rate for the Screen Actors Guild. That is the, I guess, minimum wage, I suppose, of the acting world for a day's work. So, you know what? Get on the show, get $516, and also, of course, a trophy for the show.
I wonder if you get SAG credit for that.
Probably not. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to get everybody on the show in a timely manner, I would wager.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't know about what it takes to get registered for that, but I assume it's not just to show up to a studio and sign a piece of paper kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, so we're done with gameplay. At one point they did a worst act of the week, where of all the gonged acts for the course of the week, they chose which one. They later renamed it from worst act to, like, I think most memorable or something along those lines, to A, be a little less mean, but B, also indicate that it wasn't just the fact that it was bad, but just memorable. And they got the prize money as well of $516.32, as well as a dirty tube sock.
I love the dirty tube sock. That's amazing.
That's what this show is. It's a whole bunch of why not? Just do it because you can kind of crap.
And you and I had talked at length about this, and you kind of went the opposite way on it, and I kind of went the opposite way on it. I really feel like that I'm the show guy and you're the game guy. And because this had no game, I totally expected you to hate this game and just basically bash the hell out of it. And I know you said that you're in the other party.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I went into it with the same expectation as you. When you pitched it to me, I was like, sure, we're going to do this. And then it's going to be like Match Game and Hollywood Squares, where I just talk crap about it and feel bad and make people think that I don't actually like game shows or something. But I think
you hate all the game shows, Michael.
Well, and the other thing is that it's a lot like American Idol, this show, and I do not like American Idol. I especially don't like the earlier episodes of American Idol where we're making fun of people and dashing their hopes and being mean and making them feel like I don't like that kind of television. I'm not into it, and I was afraid that was a lot of what this was going to be. I think that my rationale for sort of enjoying and or defending this show is twofold. One, I don't think there are more than a handful of acts in the entirety of this show that don't know what's going on. There's no one who has an American Idol level of expectation of what's going to come on the show. Everybody knows what the Gong show is. Everybody knows what they're in for. There might be people whose feelings are hurt and they got Gong sooner than they thought they would or something like that. But I guarantee you there's nobody going in there who's like, they're not being mean to anyone. I don't feel. Well, I may be wrong about that, but that's the impression that I got during my research.
I got to tell you that was why I really didn't like this show, is because I really felt like there's some people out there really giving it their all and they're just getting gonged off, and it's basically like they're making fun of them. But again, after talking to you, you're right. Like, nobody's trying out for the show going, oh, I'm not going to get gonged. I'm the best ever singer. And then they get on there and they're absolutely awful and they get gonged off in the first 10 seconds. I mean, you know that you always run the risk of getting gonged off, especially when the show's premise is about fun and funny and zany and loony and crazy. And I mean, that's just the way it is. So I feel a lot better about that this isn't an American Idol type game show.
Yes. And so then my second point, though, was I think what I didn't like about Match Game and Hollywood Squares was that it was focused on the celebrity guests and not the people, the contestants. And the Gong Show is all about the contestants. Like, Chuck Barris is a madman. The band is fantastic, but they don't take center stage. They let the contestants take center stage. The judges are having fun, but they're having fun with the contestants. Again, with, not at the expense of. And the contestants run this show just as much as anyone else, and that's what I like in shows as much as I do traditional gameplay. This is lacking in gameplay. It's not a game, but it is a showcase of contestants, and I think that went a long way with me.
Yeah, and I'm on the opposite end of that, and we'll talk more about it after the history when we get to ratings, but not my favorite show at all. I kind of dig it, and there's obviously some great parts to it and some unique things that happen that I think are wonderful, but we'll talk more about that when we get to history. Speaking of which, we should probably take a break, and when we come back, we've got history to talk about, Michael.
Fantastic. Let's break.
All right, you've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. And welcome back, episode 17, segment number 3. It's the history segment of The Gong Show.
Indeed, the history segment significantly longer than the gameplay segment. So let's get right into it. It debuted June 14th, 1976, and though Chuck Barris is, of course, the creator, producer, best-known host, it was originally hosted by John Barber, and He did not last very long. The announcer, though, Johnny Jacobs, no relation, he was there for the entire tenure.
Nice. Yeah, I think he did get sick at some point and was subbed out for a couple episodes, but that's about it.
Yeah. I mean, he was there from start to finish. I didn't mean he was uninterrupted.
And you don't know that he's not related to you.
I suppose that's true. I've not looked into it. I just assumed.
Well, originally, Mike, funny thing is I found that the idea actually came from a Canadian songwriter, if you can believe that.
Really? Celine Dion?
No, there was a guy. Yes, my heart will go on. There was a guy named Tommy Hunter. He was Canada's country gentleman, and he had some sort of like show that he did, like some sort of variety show back in the day. And he was saying to this guy that was named Chris Beard. He was a producer. And he said that he had this dude that came, and I'll read the lines to you, the actual quote. It says, Hunter was telling me about these guys that juggle and throw bowling pins up in the air, and then they bang them on the head and never catch them. Then they take 4 bowling pins and they throw them up in the air again, and they miss every one of them again. And then they turn to the audience and they say, now we'd like to do this blindfolded.
That's pretty great.
So he comes up with this idea to throw Hunter in a tuxedo and have him introduce all these crazy acts, and he pitches it to CBC, and they said no. And when they did, he went to Chuck Barris, and they came up with this.
Yeah, well, Chuck Barris, of course, no stranger to game shows at this point, having already done Newlywed Game and Dating Game. But John Barber, the original host, he was not a fan of that sort of angle of the missing the bowling pins. He wanted to make it a real talent show with real people that knew how to juggle, showcasing their talents. But Chuck Barris said, no, that's not what we're going for here. That's not what we want. And in fact, it was the NBC executives that requested that Chuck Barris be subbed in to host for Barber, or not subbed in, straight up replaced. So while it does seem like the creator says, hey, no, I'm taking over, the executives wanted it to happen.
Yeah, but you remember that conversation that we had with Christian during the news, though. The way he handled it sucked.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Chuck Barris does not seem to be the greatest of human beings. I want to separate the talent of game show producer / host, and I don't even think he's a talented host. I think he is able to host this show. I don't think he would host anything else well. But the professional man versus the personal man, he is not a really good guy from what I could gather. I'm not a fan of him. While I do like this show and I will defend the show and even his production of this show, he himself leaves a lot to be desired. I don't want to go into the movie too much. We touched about it before, and in the book he wrote, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. I think it's meant as fiction. I hope it's meant as fiction. I hope he's not that bonkers. But again, I don't want to give him more credit than he deserves, honestly.
I'm with you. All right, continue.
So one of the things, though, that was sort of his deal with this show, where I do want to give credit, is it was his show. He wanted to make his own show. For example, he hated the idea of wearing the tuxedo, and you can tell that as the shows progress, his tie starts to come undone, or his shirt will be untucked, or his jacket will be askew, and he's just more and more pushing this boundary of what he can get away with and what will succeed on the show. And we'll kind of go more into his rebellious nature as it happens, but that becomes kind of a thing for him. I also think we should mention the man Milton Lugg. He was the musical director and band leader. There's a fantastic band accompanying any acts that require such.
And this is, again, a positive for me, Mike, a musical accompaniment.
For sure. And a great one. Like, they are able to go along with any act perfectly. Like, it's great. They do a fantastic job. So I really wanted to mention them because it's a huge part of this show. And we mentioned this before, that in musical improv, it's just as much a player as anything else, even though you don't see it. And I think that's very much true for this show.
Absolutely.
But the problem with this show was it started in a really bad time slot. It was one that was usually, I think it was like, oh gosh, I wish I could remember now, but earlier in the morning, like maybe 11:30, something like that. Something that was typically reserved for local news programs, things of that nature. And it just had a real tough time finding an audience and catching on. In 1977, they moved it into the afternoon. I believe it was 4 p.m. at that time, but it was another time slot that was often preempted, again, for either local news or those like afternoon talk shows that you'd see from time to time. So again, it just had difficulty attracting an audience, getting people to see it and notice it and pay attention to. But then finally it moved to the 12:30, 11:30 time central, and that's where things took off. It was able to, like I say, find that audience that it really needed, and people were able to see it because people love this show. Obviously the wild and wacky stuff is funny. It's fun to watch people fail. It's fun to watch people try to fail. And there's a lot of really good stuff too. There's a like supercut on YouTube of sort of the best. There's some bad ones in there too, but the best of the bad, I guess. But there are some musical acts that just absolutely cook, like some bluegrass bands and sort of, roots Americana stuff. And it's just such great music. And there's a lot of fun, talented people on that show. Talented in their own ways a lot of times, but still. And 1978 is when I guess it had really picked up steam by this point, and this is when we're starting to get maybe a little too far. First was what's known as the Popsicle Twins incident. Probably don't want to go too much into this, but the short version is Chuck used to try and book really like not ever gonna make it on TV kind of acts so that he could get the more risque ones snuck under the radar. Well, this one was one of the ones that shouldn't have made it to air, but somehow it got through. Two women come out on stage in skimpy clothing and very much enjoy popsicles. I'll leave it at that. If you want to go find it, you certainly can. Of course, after it happened, the NBC folks caught it and said, nope, this has got to go. It's been cut out, but you can still find copies of it. And it's even been replayed in like documentaries and stuff as well. It's not like it's hard to find. What is kind of hard to find is it later in 78, J.P. Morgan flashing Chuck during a during a Gene the Dancing Machine routine. She fully bared her chest on camera, and as a matter of fact, got banned from the show after that. She was no longer allowed on, unfortunately.
Yeah, that never actually made it to air, but it did end up in the movie.
Indeed. We'll talk about the movie in a minute. But over the time, so this is an amateur show, right? But they had a lot of legitimate acts, maybe some before they were famous, but still, we had Paul Rubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman. He was on there many times. Michael Winslow, you may remember him from the Police Academy movies. He made all the funny noises with his mouth. He was really good at sound effects and things like that.
Yeah.
The band Oingo Boingo, best known for their, well, for me,
it's a dead man's party.
Well, yes, but
Who
Weird
could
Science.
ask for more?
The Weird Science theme song is really what.
Yeah, Weird Science. That's right. I totally forgot they did that too.
Yeah.
Wow. So they weren't a one-hit wonder.
Oh no. Well, and of course the band was fronted by Danny Elfman, who now does many film and TV soundtracks.
Yeah.
We had Andrea McArdle, who later went on to play Annie on Broadway.
Yep.
Cheryl Lynn, who had a hit disco track in the late 70s. And in fact, the antithesis to what I was saying earlier about American Idol, she got her contract because of her appearance on The Gong Show. So there is something to be said for that.
There you go. That's great.
And one act that caught my eye particularly is it's a sort of like comedy punk band called Green Jelly. They have a song of the Three Little Pigs. The video used to play on MTV a lot when I was younger, and it's really cool. It's like a claymation video, but it's like a kind of punky, hard but silly version of the Three Little Pigs, and it's great. Go check it out.
Interesting. Totally interesting. Funny, we should mention this, Mike. I read somewhere that Weird Al actually auditioned for the show.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all. He would have been perfect for this.
He got turned down.
Oh my God. It wasn't because he was too good, I guess.
He said he and a friend drove down from LA. They auditioned for the show, and they did a song called Mr. Frump in the Iron Lung.
I know that song very well.
They said the audience loved it, but they never got the call back. Only 10%, roughly, they said, in general, the article that I was reading, of all of the auditions actually got a call back, though. So don't hold that against Weird.
Sure. So one person I found, and I had to do a lot of cross-checking to make sure this was all accurate and correct and real.
Okay.
And again, maybe it's not, but based on the 4 or 5 things I checked out, it seems to be real. We'll make a correction if not. Stanley Tookie Williams III is a man who was on this show. He appeared as a weightlifter. He is one of the 2 founders of the Crips gang in Los Angeles. And his appearance on the Gong Show was 8 years after the Crips had been formed. So he was already a well-established major gang leader. Probably, eventually he was arrested and convicted and put to death for murder. So he had probably murdered many, many people by the time he was on the Gong Show. That's just absolutely wild to me.
That to me actually says something about how popular the show is.
Well, that's true. And apparently they don't do background checks.
I would agree with that.
And then there's also a bunch of recurring bits. Famously, the unknown comic. Even if you're not familiar with the Gong Show, I have to imagine someone at some point in your life, everybody's seen the unknown comic. He is a man with a paper bag over his head, and he just tells really schlocky jokes. He is a terrible comedian, and he himself admits it. I've forgotten his real name, but I've never seen him without the mask. I don't think it would matter because he's just a guy. But he admits that his whole thing was he needed some money, I think, to make rent or something simple like that. He didn't want his buddies at work to see him on the Gong Show telling terrible jokes, so he put a bag over his head. It's just that simple. But he just so happened to end up being a huge hit and got repeat performances. We also had, like I mentioned earlier, Gene the Dancing Machine. He was actually a stagehand, and one day Chuck Barris just saw him doing his little dance and was like, oh, we got to get him out there. And they just had 2 minutes to fill or something like that at the end of an episode, and they were out of acts, so he just, here's Gene the Dancing Machine. And I mean, it was obviously a Chuck Barris pet project, but again, it was that this is not necessarily rebellious, but just the Chuck Barris, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to do just crazy, ridiculous stuff, and it's going to be fun.
It was crazy. They were throwing things at him.
Yeah, the stage was just littered with crap afterwards. And the audience is just going bananas. It's insanity. And I was watching one, and I texted you. It was midnight last night, and I'm watching this, and all I could think was, imagine if an alien comes to Earth, and this is the first thing they see. A Gene Dancing Machine bit on the Gong Show. That, I think that would...
Heaven help us.
Right? It's just sheer madness. And one other recurring bit real quick that I want to mention was Larry and his magic instrument. Larry was also a cast or a crew member on the show, but he would come out and just do this back and forth call and response thing with the audience, where the audience would be like, what you gonna do? And he says, I'm gonna play the one I saw was giant fiddle, and he had a huge upright bass. And so he just keeps doing this back and forth with the audience, acting like he's gonna play it right now, and then he never actually gets around to playing it. And that's the whole bit. In that specific one, he tried to play the double bass like a fiddle, and it, too heavy, it knocked him over or whatever. But in some shows, he just runs out of time, or he gets gonged before he can play. But the recurring bit is he never gets to play any of his magic instruments. Poor Larry.
All right, yeah.
So the final episode runs of the primary series, I suppose, July 21st, 1978. But the syndicated version continues to run for another 2 years after that. But the final episode on 78 is really the quote-unquote final episode. There's a big sign-off and all that kind of stuff. And
Chuck Barris performs.
He does. He gets the gong.
Oh, he gets the gong,
finally,
too.
After
Good.
so many years, he gets his comeuppance.
Let me ask you a question. How could you not gong him? You had to gong him.
100%. Had to.
You had to.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. 1980. There was also a Gong Show, the movie. It was written and directed by Robert Downey Sr., Iron Man's dad.
Oh.
Yeah. But Chuck Barris, again, kind of did his thing and took over and did whatever the heck he wanted. And I think even he himself admitted that was not a good move. And it did not end up up well. We were talking earlier about the money. It's box office made $6.6 million, which is not an insignificant amount, but I think a lot of that was just like that the Gong Show was popular and people wanted to see the movie. Once people saw what it was, I don't think there was a lot of repeat viewings of it. It was pretty universally panned, and as a matter of fact, it was removed from the theaters after just a couple of days. I think it was only run like 3 or 4 days before they pulled it. Did not succeed. And speaking of not succeeding, we have a string of not so well received attempts at revivals and reboots. In 88 and 89, we had a version hosted by a San Francisco DJ by the name of Don Blue. Don't know much about him. Game Show Network had Extreme Gong in 98 and 99.
Everything was so extreme back in those days.
98, 99, of course. I'm surprised that it starts with an E. I thought it would just be extreme.
Yeah, exactly right.
And then 2008, Comedy Central did one with Dave Attell as the host. I've never seen that one, but Dave Attell's not bad. I don't know much about him. I've seen him he did Insomniac on Comedy Central back in the day and random things here and there, but I assume that's got to be pretty decent, but it never really made it. And Tom, if I recall, you said there were some attempts at versions scattered.
There
here
were
and there?
actually. There was a 1995 version that was actually, they shot the pilot, and it was with the host of a gentleman by the name of Chuck Booms. He was a very, I don't know how to say it. He's a comic that just, his shtick was being mean. And he just was a mean guy. I mean, if you listen to him, he's very opinionated. He's very, I don't care about you, it's all about me kind of thing. He's a radio disc jockey now. But I have a personal story for him. I opened up for him when I was doing stand-up comedy in 1996.
Oh, wow.
And he was showing, it was him and Jenny McCarthy was co-hosting it with him.
Oh.
And he had the pilot, and he was running that outside the theater that we were performing at as people were waiting to get in. To tell you the truth, it's the biggest show I ever performed in front of, 625 people.
Wow.
The place was jammed. And what was great is that it was on a Thanksgiving Day show, too, which I did not expect there to be that many people on Thanksgiving that wanted to go see a show. But he treated me like $1 million. I went up there and I did 10 minutes and I sucked, which is what you're supposed to do when you open up. And he came out there and was like, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Tommy B. He killed it. He has got the hardest job in comedy. I have been there, and give him a lot of love. And I was like, wow. This guy, for being mean and nasty, just was like super nice to me.
That's great. Well done.
Yeah. So anyway, there was that version. There was a 2000 version that was supposed to be hosted by Tom Arnold that never came about. And a 2003 version that the WB was working with UPN or something to put something together, before the CW came into effect. But that never made it either. Apparently, they were getting the host of the Comedy Central roast, Jeffrey Ross.
Oh, yeah, I know him.
To be the host, and that didn't go either. So those are the 3 that didn't make it.
Well, if those all sound like maybe they're mean takes on it, and maybe that's why they didn't work out, because the show's not supposed to be mean. But that's not the only versions. There was also a 2017 version. It was hosted by Mike Myers, but he was under the character name of Tommy Maitland, supposed to be a British stand-up comedian character. That ran for 2 seasons, got a revival, or not a revival, a renewal in 2018. Again, don't know much about this one. We wanted to talk about the primary version, but if you look at the list of some of the judges they had on the show, they were pulling in some big talent. We had Will Arnett, he was the producer, Zach Galifianakis, Allison Brie, Maya Rudolph, Rob Riggle, Jimmy Kimmel, on and on and on and on and on. Go check out the list. They clearly had some clout on that show.
Nice.
And there's also the Gong Show Live in New York City. It started in August of 2010. It was originally a one-off at B.B. King's Blues Club in New York, but it apparently still runs to this day. They have a website at gongshowlive.net, but I don't know. It doesn't look terribly current. They have tickets for a 2019 show in May. Obviously, not a lot is going on in person right now anyway, so I don't know what the status of that is, but if you're in the New York area and maybe after all this madness is over, go check out Gong Show Live.
That would be cool. To me, this is something that I think translates to a live show extremely well.
I agree for sure. Because again, it's a talent show. What is a talent show other than a live show? Like, you want to do it in front of an audience.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's time now, Mike, for ratings.
Indeed. We're going to rate on gongs, I reckon. What else would it be?
I don't know. I definitely think it's on gongs.
Yeah. Well, I'll go first. Again, I went into this thinking I was going to go super low and hate it. And I was really caught off guard with how much I enjoyed it. And Chuck Barris is a madman. I don't know what he's doing with that stupid bucket hat pulled over his eyes. Apparently he wasn't on drugs. He did that all straight. I don't know if that's true or not, but I could not find a single person to dispute that. So I'm going to assume it's true, which to me makes it more admirable, I guess, that he is just that weird of a dude. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm gonna land at a solid 3.5, 3.5 gongs, because again, it's about the contestants. It's so much fun. Everybody's having a great time, and even the people that are getting gonged, I think, are doing so in good spirits.
I think it's a lot of fun, but I also think there's a reason why none of these revivals of this last any decent amount of time. I think that it was a fun show for the 70s. I think that the world was in a weird place at that time. I think Chuck Barris is a terrible person, and I know that if I have to draw that separately from the show, but unfortunately, I think it kind of like bleeds into that. I don't know what he was doing. He was a whack job. I find it incredibly hard to believe he was not on some sort of substances or liquids or something while he was doing the show. But if he wasn't, that's even crazier. I'm glad that it's not an American Idol show where people are getting made fun of for laughs, but at the same time, this doesn't do an awful lot for me. Even though I'm the show guy and I went into this really thinking I would love the show part of it. It just doesn't do it for me. I'm not a huge fan of it. I got to give it, it's American Mainstay. I got to give it at least, 2 because of that. I'm going to say 2, and I'll give it a 2.25 because of the musical accompaniment was strictly out of this world.
Yeah. I mean, who knew that we would go polar opposites in the opposite direction on this one,
Yeah. And I guess that's because neither one of us really watched it as kids, and we may have caught it in reruns and whatnot, but we never specifically watched it.
Well, what's interesting is the episodes are hard to find online, and I still, to this day, as we record right now, do not believe I have seen a full episode start to finish intact.
All right, Mike. Well, that's all we've got time for today.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Buzzerblog. Thank you, everybody out there. Thank you to the 30-some-odd people that listened to the mess up last week and didn't unsubscribe because of it.
Let's hope they didn't unsubscribe. Tune in again next week. We'll bring you the latest and greatest in the world of game shows. We'll also bring you a brand new featured show, too.
And until then, you can catch us online at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, tellthemwhatthey'vewon.com.
Please subscribe, share, like, and drop a review if you like what you heard.
And if you didn't like it...
You've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast, Tell Them What They've Won, a JTech audio production, copyright 2020. No part of this podcast may be reproduced by anyone without the express written consent of the creators. For more information or to contact us, please go to tellthemwhatthey'vewon.com. All right, Mike, what did you learn this week?
Well, I think I'm going to redefine my way of enjoying game shows and not say that it's the game versus the show, but rather the focus being the contestant versus the crew, as it were. I'm okay with a good show so long as the contestants are the ones being featured. Otherwise, it just feels like a bunch of celebrities sitting around tooting their own horns, patting each other on the back, and I don't like.
Well, once again, this is because you always picture yourself on the show.
Yeah, well, again, contestants. That's what the game shows are for.
I always picture myself on the show as the celebrity.
There you go.
For me, I learned that sometimes changing up the status quo is good. And what I mean by that is, like, when this show came out, it was never been done. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was zany. It was crazy. It was absolutely wow.
Nothing like it existed.
But you try to bring back that magic and you're not zany and new. You're just zany, and it's been done. And so that's why I think it really didn't stick over all those years that it was brought back.
Solid point.
Yeah, so bringing up the status quo, changing it up, good the first time only.
Well, we better not change our status quo then.
Copyright 2020, a JTech audio production.